And now I'm handing it over to Jill, and it's going to be an amazing message. Thank you.
Thank you for your confidence, Stuart. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jill Baker, and I'm thrilled to be here. As you may know, I lead biblical evidence tours through the British Museum and creation evidence tours through the Natural History Museum in London. And I've recently joined the street evangelism team in Leicester Square. This morning, I will share a little of the abundant evidence available for us to use in his service. I have a YouTube channel called Biblicaltours, one word, where I have both biblical archaeology and creation evidence videos. It's not monetized. For most of the apologetics ministries, they deal with one subject, a speciality. As a tour guide in both museums, I am dealing with archaeological and creation evidence. We have so much evidence across both areas, we should be the most confident witnesses to the truth of God's historical claims. In 2019, I was able, by God's grace, to join biblical archaeologist Joel Kramer, and I filmed his tour of Israel using my iPhone. Joel kindly gave me permission to upload the videos. We went to the restricted areas to film archaeological sites mentioned in the Bible, from Tel Dan and the Golan Heights in the north, to Samaria and Judea, down to Qumran and Masada in the south. Joel's YouTube channel is called Expedition Bible and is excellent. The historical narrative of the Bible is so detailed that when you visit many archaeological sites, the topography matches perfectly and you understand that it was written as an eyewitness account. We've not been left without evidence. Much of it is on display in museums or still waiting patiently under the ground to be found. My filming and editing are of low quality, but Joel's teaching and biblical locations are wonderful. Here is a map of the Natural History Museum, labelled with most of the talking points of the tour. During tours, I use keynote presentations and video clips played through an iPad for the attendees to watch. There are a large number of scientists producing high-quality YouTube videos debunking the evolutionary explanations used by the museum. As you can see, the museum is huge, and I often have to limit the talking points in order to get through. Most tour groups don't see the majority of the tour purely because of a lack of time. With every talking point, we are dismantling often blatant frauds and highlighting the genius of our Creator. John 1, 1-3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. Here is a gallery list. We have the Human Evolution Gallery. Birds, creepy crawlies, fossil marine reptiles, dinosaurs, fishes, amphibians and reptiles, human biology, mammals and mammals blue whale, and the marine invertebrates. Now, this is an old map because one gallery was removed a couple of years ago. Can you guess which one? The Human Biology Gallery was removed and is being replaced by a climate change gallery, which I have been told is more in keeping with the museum's ethos. This is a display case in the Natural History Museum featuring Charles Darwin. Here is what the museum has chosen to feature. It reads, after nearly 30 years of exploration, study and research, in 1859 Darwin published his theory of evolution by natural selection in his book On the Origin of Species. He proposed that individuals within a species that accidentally develop a genetic trait that benefits their survival could pass on to their offspring, and thereby the species would gradually evolve. The quote below suggests a bias. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work worthy of the interposition of a deity. More humble, and I believe truer, to consider him created from animals. Charles Darwin and Charles Lyell wanted to separate Moses from science. The 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, contain the historical accounts of creation and Noah's flood. Replacing God's description of what happened in the past with a very slow and gradual, random, unguided, purely materialistic narrative, Darwin erases the supernatural creator and replaces him with nothing made everything. The full title of Darwin's book is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favoured Races in the Struggle for Life. We don't seem to hear the full title anymore. Sir Richard Owen, who wanted the Natural History Museum designed as a cathedral to showcase the creations of God, knew Darwin and challenged Darwin's theory at the time with Bishop Samuel Wilberforce, publishing a rebuttal in the Quarterly Review in 1860. It's an excellent refutation which you can read today. 1 Corinthians 3, 18 to 23. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile. Genesis 1, 26 to 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. 1 Corinthians 15:39. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of animals, another of fish, and another of birds. Firstly, Lamarck and then Darwin proposed a tree of life, where every creature and plant had to be linked together through a random, unguided pathway of genetics. Environmental factors did the sorting, and starting with a self-replicating cell, which magically comes into existence, the unbroken chain of life moved ever upward in complexity until it reached the pinnacle, the human. This tree of life is on display in the Oxford University Natural History Museum. It professes to show when the major animal groups emerged. The chart says that the blue lines represent widely accepted fossil record dates, and the green lines represent the range of molecular clock dates. Now, my photo doesn't show the colours clearly. So the thick lines are for the fossil ages, and the thin lines are for the genetic ages. Here is the museum description for the Tree of Life. When did the major animal groups we know today emerge? The fossil record blue lines places them later in the evolutionary timescale than molecular clock evidence from genetic changes, the green lines. Scientists are still working to clarify the evidence, as well as the correct position in the family tree of mysterious groups like ctenophores. As you can clearly see for yourself, the fossils that are found in the ground are assigned ages that disagree with the genetic molecular clock ages. So something doesn't add up. So according to the Tree of Life chart, humans are descended from chordates. Given enough time and random, unguided chance mutations, the chordate is your ancestor. God isn't telling the truth when he described how he created Adam and Eve. The family tree of Jesus Christ doesn't start with Adam and Eve. Jesus isn't the final Adam who lived a sinless life to redeem us from the curse of sin our ancestor Adam committed. The wages of sin is death, and only by the shedding of innocent blood can there be any remission for sin. Darwin's tree of life is in direct opposition to God's family tree. Darwin's tree is a progression through death. God's tree starts with life. Darwin's tree of life has no idea how stenophores or comb jellyfish evolved. Jesus loves beauty and variety. They were created by him and for him. The Natural History Museum, London Museum, has 80 million objects and forms the world's most important natural history collection. School groups are led through daily to be taught Darwin's theory, so it's the best place to challenge the theory. For evolution to be true, we need to see gallery upon gallery of intermediate fossils of one creature evolving into another. For creation, we should see everything in its kind. We should see many variations within kinds, but not see a dog turning into a whale. In his book, Charles Darwin raised a lack of transitional fossils as a possible objection to his own theory. Why, if species have descended from other species by fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? Later in this chapter of his landmark book, he expressed hope that the future discoveries would be made of transitional forms or of creatures that showed some transitional structure, perhaps a half-scale, half-feather. As over 1 billion fossils have been unearthed, the intermediate forms should be commonplace and on display, but the museum doesn't have them. Dr. Colin Patterson, senior paleontologist, British Museum of Natural History, in correspondence to Luther Sunderland, quoted in Darwin's Enigma, 1988, page 89. I fully agree with your comments on the lack of evolutionary transitions in my book. If I knew of any, fossil or living, I would certainly have included them. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. According to materialistic worldview, nothing exploded and created everything. Known as the Big Bang, this theory is in direct opposition to God's description of the events. And I absolutely love the James Webb Space Telescope. It has destroyed the Big Bang. I use this video in the museum tour.
I'm thinking of some of my favorites, the God equation, physics of the future, future of humanity. Most of them say the universe is about 13 billion years old. What if it's not?
Well, that's the problem. The James Webb Space Telescope is upsetting the apple cart. All of a sudden, we realize that we may have to rewrite all the textbooks about the beginning of the universe. Now, it takes many billions of years to create a galaxy, like the Milky Way galaxy, with 100 billion stars, many billions of years old. But the James Webb Telescope has identified 6 galaxies that exist half a billion years after the Big Bang that are up to 10 times bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. That shouldn't happen. There should not be primordial galaxies that are bigger than the Milky Way galaxy that are only half a billion years old. Something is wrong. We may have to revise our theory of the creation of the universe.
And now, the James Webb Space Telescope is identifying objects in the dark ages that, by best measurements we have, are large, fully developed galaxies. So who ordered that?
This discovery sets the stage for further exploration and excitement in the field of astronomy. Astronomers were left reeling after recent images revealed a mind-boggling discovery: a colossal galaxy, dwarfing even our Milky Way, and a pint-sized galaxy, deemed too tiny to exist, were found to coexist in the early universe. The unexpected sighting has caused an uproar in the astronomy community, with scientists scrambling to explain how such a cosmic odd couple could end up in the same cosmic neighborhood. The implications of this perplexing find are still being studied, leaving many wondering what other mysteries the universe has yet to unveil.
Because if it's a new kind of object, that's also a discovery. And so, and by the way, the James Webb Space Telescope was conceived and designed to help us understand the origin of galaxies. So we shouldn't be surprised that it's forcing us to scratch our head.
So according to Darwin's theory, the process of evolution comes into play only after you have self-replicating life. So how do we get life from non-life? Dr. James Tour is a synthetic organic chemist. He is a professor of chemistry and a professor of materials and nanoengineering at Rice University in Houston, Texas. He challenges the origin of life scientists all of the time, because you simply cannot get life from non-life. Here is a short video explaining the process and I use on the tours.
We're going to talk about the origin of life today. All right, so this is a car, and mind you, this is much less parts than are needed to make a cell. What if you had to gather them and put the parts of the car together? What if all of these parts were scattered throughout planet Earth? And many people would say, well, you know, these things are not limited to Earth. Okay, well, now find it. Find it out there. Find it out there. The parts have been scattered out there, and they happen to come to Earth on meteorites over a period of many, many years. That's what we're up against in the origin of life. Try to put something together, and now the parts go bad. You know, say a certain part is there on Earth, and you're waiting for other parts to come, and in the meantime, the parts go bad. Same thing happens to organic molecules. They decompose. Molecules don't care about life. Organisms care about life, but chemistry, on the contrary, is utterly indifferent to life. Without biologically derived entity acting upon them, molecules have never been shown to evolve toward life. Never. Molecules don't evolve. They don't move toward life. They have no reason to move toward life.
There are 3 icons of evolution, and they are found in the Natural History Museum. Some with claimed fossil evidence. The Human Evolution Gallery has the ape to man evidence. Archaeopteryx is the claimed missing link between dinosaurs and birds and is used in several galleries. And the terrestrial mammal to aquatic mammal or dog to whale is in the Mammals Blue Whale Gallery. Please understand the theory of evolution hangs on these icons being true. If they are provably true, then the origin of life is true. The transitional lineage of life must also be true. And God's historical narrative of 6 days of creation and Noah's global flood are lies, myths, fables, and allegory. You absolutely, beyond no shadow of a doubt, can hold both views as true. Charles Darwin and Charles Lyell wanted Moses, the Pentateuch, out of science. Now, at the ladies' lunch, we looked at the extra biblical evidence that shows the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, Noah's flood, and the Tower of Babel are corroborated either before Moses wrote the Pentateuch, or we have the indigenous and archaeological evidence. To show tour attendees excellent evidence for creation throughout the tours, I have permission to use Dr. Carl Werner's research. He and his wife, Debbie, have spent 27 years visiting natural history museums, fossil dig sites, and they have interviewed eminent paleontologists across the world while collecting evidence for their evolution versus creation research. I highly recommend his book collection called Evolution: The Grand Experiment, and his new video series to see interviews with the paleontologists. You will see for yourself which scientists have committed fraud after fraud or are simply hiding their ape-men fossils from scrutiny for years and years. This practice of hiding fossil evidence actually disqualifies these fossils from being disproven. so they therefore cannot be considered as evidence for Darwin's theory. So I use Carl's research throughout the tour by showing clips from the scientists' interviews. The ape-to-man skull lineage at the beginning of the Human Evolution Gallery has this description: tracing our origins. We have evolved over millions of years through a slow and complex process of change. The fossil record shows that the human family tree is made up of many ancient relatives and that ape-like ancestors evolved into us. This wall shows the ancient relatives we know about so far and when they lived. These species evolved after our human branch split from the line that led to the chimpanzee and the bonobo. This split is estimated to have happened about 7 million years ago. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, are the only surviving species. Exactly who our direct ancestors were within this family tree is a subject of scientific debate, and new exciting discoveries are being made all the time. Dr. Carl Werner's research has uncovered and documented major frauds in the ape-to-man family tree. So Tumai is the 6 to 7 million year old specimen. Lucy is the famous upright walking ape. On a tour, I go through a lot of videos of the frauds before we go into the gallery and look at the exhibits. The Piltdown Man fraud was committed by a curator of the Natural History Museum called Martin Hinton. He stole and altered fossils before painting them to make them look old and burying them at 2 dig sites. His trunk was found in the museum containing the incriminating evidence. It is not known if other staff were working with him. Here is a list of the famous paleontologists. You become famous and enjoy a long career with lots of grants for further research if you find an ape man. It's not until after they have retired or died that their fraud might be publicised. The inaccessible list at the bottom is where the paleontologists are hiding the fossils from scrutiny from other researchers. So according to the scientific method, you must be able to have the opportunity to prove something right or wrong. By refusing scrutiny, these fossils should be disqualified from the ape-to-man family tree. 43,000 mistakes, 232 mistaken ape-men species, 200 mistaken tools, 42,252 mistaken stone tools, hundreds of mistakenly assigned ages, hundreds of mistakenly redundant species names. Have you heard about any of this? Yeah. That's good. Carl personally travelled to these locations to film the evidence. The video series is excellent, and you soon realise that a huge scam against man has been going on for decades and decades. Carl names those who committed the frauds, and no one has refuted him. These are well-known paleontologists earning fame and fortune to fraudulently portray that we have evolved from apes and are not created by God in his image. Here is Dr. Donald Johanson, who's Lucy's the upright walking apes discoverer. There wouldn't be any conflict of interest or bias, would there? When Carl says a fraud, what does he mean? In this clip, Dr. Donald Johanson narrates what we see his colleague, Dr. Owen Lovejoy, do to Lucy's hip bone because the evidence just doesn't look right.
The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later fossilization. This has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bone seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Funny that, isn't it? So this is how Lucy used to be presented in the NHM London. She had been given human hands and feet. She's taller than the 3.5 feet tall that she is, and she is holding a root vegetable and pledging allegiance to someone. Having just seen Dr. Owen Lovejoy altering Lucy's hip bone, he is an expert in footprint analysis too.
And eventually other footprints were left, ones that look as familiar as our own. Before another rain shower could wash them away, more ash fell, covering the prints and capturing them forever as the ash hardened into rock. 3.5 million years later, anthropologist Mary Leakey found this path of footprints exposed once more by erosion. 2 individuals clearly walked here, and details of the prints suggest that another followed them, stepping in the prints left by one of those who walked ahead. Footprints can reveal other secrets too, as forensic scientist Owen Lovejoy knows.
There's no better evidence than that provided by a footprint. That's what makes the Laetoli print so exciting, because they give us a direct record of how our ancestors walked almost 4 million years ago. When we compare the Laetoli print to that of a chimpanzee, the difference is immediately obvious. The chimpanzee, which is a quadruped but occasionally a biped, still has a free great toe, and that great toe extends out away from the foot and leaves a very distinct mark. On the other hand, when we compare the Laetoli print to that of a crime scene human print, they're virtually indistinguishable. The great toe is in line with the rest of the toes, and what this has done in the human and the Laetoli print is to create an arch. And that's a hallmark of typical modern upright locomotion, because the arch is an energy absorber. And that's the kind of fine tuning that you would expect in a biped that had been that way for a very long period of time.
So when Carl visited Laetoli in Tanzania to photograph the museum fossils, they brought out LH18, a human skull, which had also been found there. Lucy's foot bones haven't been found except for the odd toe and finger bones, which are curved for climbing trees, just like a bonobo or a chimpanzee. If the Laetoli footprints are human, as Mary Leakey, who found them, proclaimed, then the humans found living there made them. The footprints are given the date of 3.5 million years, which is a huge problem for the proponents of evolution. That date fits with their evolutionary time frame for an ape man, but not a Homo sapiens. As the footprints were created in a deposit of volcanic ash and found at the surface, what is actually being dated? The dating of fossils is a huge area of fraud too. So we have just witnessed altering and identifying the evidence, someone who gained fame and fortune from doing so. As Carl shows in Dr. Johansson's book, From Lucy to Language, the hip bone has been covered in plaster to hide where it was altered and also painted to look like bone. His book makes no mention that the hip bone originally looked like a chimpanzee's before they altered it. That is fraud. 1 Corinthians 3:19, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, for it is written, he catches the wise in their own craftiness. Dr. Carl Werner has looked for all of the intermediate fossils, and in the lower layer, these different phyla appear together with no intermediate fossil stages from the bacteria type first life to any of them. So during Noah's global flood, what would be buried first? Those that are found at the bottom of the ocean. So 1,000 fossil bats have been found. The scientists admit during their interviews with Carl that there are no intermediate ancestors found. One evolutionary scientist commented that this was really good evidence for the creationists, as the bat is a very complex animal. 500,000 fossil fish have been found. Yet again, no ancestors for the fish. How about the dinosaurs? Surely there must be many known ancestors. 0. For dinosaur to bird evolution, we have this excellent video by Answers in Genesis, showing us how to identify a fossil dinosaur from a fossil bird. There are clear distinctions. Depending on how the skeleton is positioned, you can make the fossil evidence fit a dinosaur or a bird. So how do we tell which is the correct way to assemble a fossil? Answers in Genesis have identified 3 requirements for each that work every time. For the bird, you will have feathered wings, a swivel wrist, and a tiny tail. For the dinosaur, you will have scaly skin, straight wrists, and a long tail. The next icon of evolution is Archaeopteryx, the stated missing link between dinosaurs and birds. The date given is 147 million years old. How old is the T-Rex? Around 68 million years old. This museum description says Archaeopteryx achieved fame by being the missing link between birds and dinosaurs. While it has impressions of feathers, a feature now unique to birds, it also has many reptilian characteristics, such as teeth, clawed fingers, and a bony tail. The cassowary and the Hoatzin birds have claws on their wings, like the Archaeopteryx, and geese have teeth. As you've seen in the previous slide, Archaeopteryx has a bird-length tail. The museum presents Archaeopteryx as the missing link between dinosaurs and birds in several galleries except the Treasures Gallery, where they show the evidence that it is fully a bird, a perching bird. After scrutinizing Archaeopteryx, scientists decided it was a bird, the earliest discovered. Bird brain. Bird brains fit very tightly in the skull, so an imprint is left on the inside of the bones. Of the 10 Archaeopteryx specimens known to science, this is the only one whose brain imprint has been fully preserved. From it, scientists built a 3D reconstruction of the brain, which shows Archaeopteryx had the sight, balance, and coordination necessary for flight. So the brain imprint proves it's a bird. Did you know that the scientists find birds with dinosaurs? Here we have the research papers for a parrot that flew around with the dinosaurs and an owl. Can you see why the dioramas in museums exclude parrots, etc.? It would destroy the millions of years that Darwin's theory relies upon. It would look too modern. God's amazingly designed owl. Its ears are positioned asymmetrically. One is higher than the other. The rough feathers are also asymmetrical. The position and direction of the feathers means that the owl can hunt in complete darkness due to sound being directed by the feathers to the correct ear. The owl knows exactly where the noise is coming from and can hunt without depending on sight. How amazingly complex are feathers. When the current scientists and movies show dinosaur with feathers, please understand why they need to do that. If the dinosaur doesn't evolve into the bird, the tree of life is irreparably broken. Birds would be a standalone kind. Jesus designed and created the feather using many different types for several different purposes: for structural colour, thermal insulation, water repellency, mechanics for stiffness and strength, and sound collection. Birds are found with dinosaurs. They were both caught up in Noah's global flood. My favourite gallery in the museum is the Mammal Blue Whale Gallery. Richard Dawkins says that this is the best evidence for Darwin's theory. The fully terrestrial mammal returning to the sea and becoming a fully aquatic creature that bears absolutely no resemblance to its ancestors. Now, please excuse the quality of this video. It was made by Dr. Hans Hewison, one of the two leading experts who have provided the most fossil evidence for the dog-type creature evolving into the whales. Watch the moving position of the eyes as the dog enters the water and morphs into Ambulocetus. They sit on top of the skull like a crocodile. This already disqualified it as being an ancestor. Dr. Hans Hewison with the fossil reconstruction of Ambulocetus. Notice the end of the snout where the nostrils are shown as moving along the top as a primitive blowhole. Carl interviewed Dr. Hewison and has him admitting on camera that those bones haven't been found. Dr. Phil Gingrich claimed that he had found the fossil evidence that proved Rhodocetus was in the lineage of the whale. He works with Dr. Hans Hewison. Dr. Phil Gingrich claimed that Rhodocetus had both flippers and a fluke tail, but when interviewed by Carl, who wanted to film the fossils, he admitted that the fluke tail and flippers hadn't been found. Therefore, he no longer believed that it is a transitional form. You've just seen two scientists being less than truthful about their evidence. I use this next short video in the museum as it clearly demonstrates the insurmountable heat problem and God's ingenious design. The Natural History Museum recently updated the Blue Whale Gallery and still left the dog-to-whale exhibit intact.
In the context of Darwinian evolution, the most crucial adaptations would involve the male reproductive system. To optimize the whale's mobility in water, its reproductive organs would have to move from the exterior of the animal's torso to inside its abdominal cavity. But to produce sperm, the internalized testes must be cooled and kept below core body temperature.
Unless it's kept below, you'd have no sperm production, period. And in evolutionary terms, sterility means it's no-go. You don't count in the race of life, so to speak.
One of the necessary conditions of natural selection is the ability to reproduce. You can't have natural selection if you don't have reproductive capability. You can't make the sperm, you can't have reproduction, you can't get natural selection operating. So you've got to solve this engineering problem.
As a male humpback swims, it generates heat, raising its body temperature. To prevent sterility, the whale relies on a refrigeration mechanism designed into its circulatory system. In the non-insulated regions of the dorsal fin and tail, blood is cooled and then transported through a network of veins to the whale's abdomen. Here, beneath a layer of muscles, a web of veins and arteries surround the testes. They are arranged so blood flows in alternate directions, and heat from the warm arteries radiates to the cooler veins. This transfer lowers the temperature of the blood to a safe level before it is channeled to the reproductive organs.
It's a remarkable solution to that problem. It's beautiful. It's anatomically complex. It involves what is called, borrowing from the Latin, a miraculous web of arteries and veins. But can you explain it by some smooth, gradualistic, textbook scenario, little change, fixation? No, it doesn't fit the Darwinian model. In my opinion, you're looking at just a suite of characters that had to have been integrated from the get-go. I mean, it's a non-gradualistic type of change. So the cooling system makes sense because you have internalized reproductive glands. The internalized reproductive glands, however, are a no-go unless you've got the cooling system. You can't explain the emergence of one without the other.
Why is it so very important for creation evidence to be taught in the church and used during evangelism? If Noah's global flood wasn't an historical event, you still can't make Darwinian evolution theory work. You will need to find a creator. You also change the character of God because he repented of creating man and sent the flood to destroy him, except those mentioned in the narrative and who repopulated the world, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. As it says in Genesis 9:18-19, now the sons of Noah went out of the ark with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Should this verse be removed from the Bible? Jesus is also being dishonest when he dishonest for referring to a state of the world being like Noah's time as the conditions required before the second judgment, as in the days of Noah. If you prefer to follow corrupt men who have purposely and fraudulently removed the evidence of God's witness to mankind, his creation, from being believed in the home, classroom, and pulpit, you might find yourself mentioned in 2 Peter 3:3-7. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. Here is the ark and the darkness.
There was an ancient world.
The fall of man.
That's why God sent the flood.
There was a judgment that happened.
It changed the world profoundly.
There is yet a future judgment coming.
It'll be just as it was in the days of Noah, in the last days, the end times.
They will be surprised when Jesus comes.
Thank you very much. Problem is men. Men love science and scientism, as C.S. Lewis said. So if I can get men to come on the tour and you take them to the Blue Whale, it sells itself. The Blue Whale Gallery, you know, the exquisite engineering of everything. But it's still hard. You can show as much evidence as you like, but the heart, often the heart won't yield. They will still go, but you haven't shown me the right amount of evidence, the right type of evidence. Some people will stay for 7 hours. I'll keep them as long as possible because every piece of evidence in the British Museum and the Natural History Museum is just taking away a little bit of their excuse not to come to the Lord and bow the knee.
Amen.
We have all the evidence in the museums. We are not without any evidence. It's very hard to find. I find it hard. I'm trying to find people to come and do the tours, especially if men could lead the tours. You've got that better
connection.
Sort of, yes, that better but I think they will come on my tours thinking, she'll know nothing.
Yeah,
it's
just a woman.
It's easy because God has given us everything. I don't even have to try. I don't break a sweat. I literally hold a TV screen and allow scientists to do the talking.
Yeah, you know, there are so many frauds and lies perpetrated upon the people of this earth. So one more time, can you just give a... Right. Okay.
Can I just give one piece of advice for parents? So I have 3 sons. I was raising them on my own. 3 sons on my own. I would show them or ask them to sit and watch a video. I would pay them £1, give them a biscuit, and then they would sit and watch a creation evidence video because we have got scientists that are doing the most amazing work. And once my sons knew that they were created, how can they ever walk away from their creator? How can they ever do it? Please raise your sons and your daughters to know that they are created.